Hello, everybody, and welcome to the ABCs of Community Building. So, in this panel, we are breaking down the basics of building a community with intention. Because whether you know it or not, if you are creating content or entertainment, you are probably forming a community already. The combined five of us that you see on the screen have a broad range of experience for different types of communities. I'm Lisa Penrose, I am your moderator, and I am currently the brand manager for a publishing platform called Dungeon Masters Guild. And I've been building communities for everything from, feminist magazines to salad restaurant companies for the last 10 years. Let's go ahead and meet our panelists.
Hey, I'm Tanya DePass. You've seen me on Rivals Waterdeep, and I manage and create a community, I Need Diverse Games. And, our community is inclusive and welcoming, and we try to do that and do our best. And you can find me everywhere on the internet as a Cypher.
Hello, I'm Latia Dekis, also on Rivals of Waterdeep. But for the last 7 months, I have been one of the community managers of the D&D Adventurers League, which is the organized play program that kind of walks alongside the hardcover books, and fostering my own community on Twitter at Latia Dekis.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Rachel, Rachel Billings. I also go by Ray on most places on the internet, R-A-Y. For the last 2 years, I've been the community manager for the small independent board game publishing company Resonum. You might know us from like Monarch or Mechanica, or more recently we kickstarted a game called Surrealist Dinner Party, so you might have seen that floating around Kickstarter.
Hi, I'm Brennan Noonan. I was previously the brand manager for Starling Games, which is a tabletop gaming company. I now have my own studio, which is called Quillsilver Studio, that provides a range of services for tabletop game companies and designers, including brand management. A lot of my communities are on Kickstarter. I've run over 40 Kickstarter campaigns, so I've managed a lot of backers on there.
Double digits.
Wow.
Yeah, we have quite a breadth of combined experience here, so I'm really excited. Is everyone ready to discuss some ABCs?
Sure.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So if you think I wasn't going to make this a cutesy acronym, you are mistaken. We have some literal ABCs that we are going through. The A stands for authenticity. So when you imagine the stereotypical community manager, a lot of people think you've got to be like super effervescent, super bubbly, very extroverted. But being a good community builder is really about being true to yourself, identifying your values, and kind of figuring out and recognizing what those bring to how you specifically build community. So panelists, tell me, why is authenticity important? And what are some scenarios where one's instinct might not be to be authentic when you really should lean into it? Does anyone want to start us off? Otherwise, I'm just going to call on somebody.
No, teacher, no.
All right, Latia.
Authenticity, it's very important for people to see who you really are, so that they know that it's okay for them to also be themselves. I am a very introverted person normally, and a lot of introverted people think that maybe they can't be a part of the community, or to be a part of the community, they have to be that, like you said, effervescent or bubbly, extroverted personality. But there's just as much a place for the quiet ones in every community as there is for the loud ones. So It's really important for people to kind of see everybody as they are, to kind of give that good example of just how diverse and widespread communities can be.
Yeah. Rachel.
Yeah, I'll kind of second that. I find that being a community manager is like the most rewarding when you build a community that you would want to be a part of. And I find that that's easiest when you lead by example, like a community where if you were on the other side, you would feel comfortable there. And I completely echo Latia in that I am very introverted. I don't feel like I fit that stereotypical like bubbly community manager. At least sometimes I try on stream, but like in real life, and that maybe comes into like being true to yourself and understanding your like limits and like what type of community manager you are, when you might see examples that might be hard for you to follow. Leading by example, I think, will lead to the type of community that you want, or the type of community you'd want to be in yourself.
Yeah. Does anyone have any examples that you can think to of a time like maybe a brand didn't really ring authentic and you saw it affect their community?
Oh, so many.
Tanya,
Well,
you want to
just
start us off?
sure. Well, when I think of brand, I usually think of like bigger brands, not so much people.
Mhm.
A recent example, and this isn't related to like individuals, but IKEA misused African American vernacular English, AAVE. And I got that in my email, and I was just like, this doesn't fit you
For
because
IKEA?
IKEA, they were like, we should
Oh,
have a
boy.
Kiki. And I was like, a what?
What? Oh no.
And like I even tried to define it in the email, and I'm like, you're a Swedish company that makes furniture. This does not fit you at all. Why are you doing this? And also just when people they present one way, like if they're very on a lot of the times, and then when you get to know them as a person, you see that it's not them. So like, I mean, I know most of you, and I'm pretty sure the person you talk to on Twitch, on a panel, in person, I'm the same grumpy person. I didn't know if we could cuss. That you're getting, whether I'm not effervescent. Bubbly is never going to be an adjective someone uses to describe me. And, there's a lot of times where I've met people, they either work for brands. And yes, I know there's a difference between doing your job and the person that you are, but it's like ramped up so much that when you meet them, you're like, oh, this is so not who you actually are. And now it's a little weird because I feel like I'm getting for public consumption version. And it makes you wonder if that's what you do, especially if your brand is you. Because most of us are independent creators. So we are our brands, as much as I hate saying that word about myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brenna,
It's totally true. And I just, like, for me, I honestly think it would be so exhausting to feel like I have to be on all the time to like fit that kind of bubbly stereotypical mold. I can definitely push it like a little bit, like if I'm in an interview or something, I may ratchet it up a little or something, but like I've never really, that's like such a common trope, of like the newscaster or something, and as soon as the cameras start rolling, they have like a whole different demeanor. I've never really been attracted to that kind of like disconnect between yourself and like the community that you're speaking to. So it's kind of like partly being true to myself, but also, I don't know, is that laziness, like not wanting to put that much effort into like having a persona?
So this is a question for all of you, a little exercise that we can do. I'm wondering, what would you say are your top 3 personal values? And then how do you think those inform your style of community building?
There's homework, Lisa. Since I opened my mouth, I'll go first. For me, it's inclusion, being welcoming, and true to who I am, and therefore bringing that to the community. I can't be a hypocrite and be one way in regards of how I act and how I manage. And also I can't be a dictator about it. Anything that I've done has been with like mod and admin feedback. I can't just make a decision, with one exception. I know I was exceptionally grumpy that day, and just go do things with no checking in with anything else. So, like collaboration, authenticity, and inclusion.
So actually, when I was first thinking about the ABCs, I actually used your brand, your personal brand, Tanya, as one of my examples for different values. And that actually rings really true to the 3 that I chose. They're a little bit different, but I said inclusivity, bold, and sort of like that paladin mindset. I feel like you're sort of a protector for others as well.
I try to be.
Yeah.
I don't always make it, but I try to be.
Latia, I saw you raise your finger.
Yes. I wanted to kind of piggyback off of collaboration, because it is one of my values. As one of 3 community managers for Adventurers League, we talk about everything. And we try to look at things from kind of like outside, like outside or opposite viewpoints when we're trying to make a decision about something. So I definitely consider collaboration one of my values. Also empathy, for me, because you never know what the person on the other side of the screen or the phone is going through. So when you're trying to resolve issues, you always want to keep in mind that you may only be getting, 25% of the actual story that someone is complaining about, or, going through, they're complaining to you about something, but what's really going on that kind of made this spill over into the community. Um, and as always, inclusivity. I'm such a stickler for it, especially these days where it is always being challenged. So to kind of keep my foot down on that and make sure that the communities that I foster are inclusive and welcoming, and I have no nonsense for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm seeing lots of overlap. Brenna.
Yeah, the three that I had written down were safety, transparency, and passion. So kind of similar to what Tanya and Latia said, when it comes to like support and inclusion, like to me, a space is not worth like having or fostering if it's not like a safe space for people, if they can't be supported to be themselves and to like talk about things in a way where they're not going to be like harassed or bullied or any of that. So like for me, that's always the foundation. Like, is this a safe space, and are we like doing the ongoing work to keep that space safe? Transparency, that's, I'm sure we'll probably get more into transparency, but I tend to be like probably more on the transparent side, just as like my strategy. I like being really open in that way. And then passion, like I really like working with communities of really like passionate people who love like whatever the topic is, whatever it's centered around. Like I love that kind of coming together of people that just have like a shared love of something.
Nice. Rachel?
And so the three that I had written down were authenticity, welcoming, and just being supportive. And so, I mean, everyone's kind of talked about inclusivity and being welcoming, and I'll just echo that. Having been a board game fan a lot longer than I've been on like the inside, I definitely know what it feels like to be in a community where you're like, this isn't quite for me. And I'd been playing board games my whole life before I was like, I'm going to join the like online community. And there's all this lingo and all this terminology. And I was like, as someone who's been playing board games my whole life, I was like, I don't understand what's happening. I don't get this. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm very adamant about at least the Resonum community. We are not like a capital B board game TM group, just because I know that can be really alienating and just really hard to enter. I think we all know that kind of like board game communities can very easily become like a board game bro like space, and I'm very passionate about like staying as far away from that as humanly possible. And I want people like, if people come into our Discord or our community and find board games through us and find a love of that hobby through us, that's really important to me. It's not just a community for people who already love the hobby. It's more about like finding the right type of people that we mesh with. And then if we can get them into board games, that's awesome. And if we can't, then we just have more cool people to talk to in general. Mm-hmm. And then just authenticity and being supportive of each other. Our space, the Resonum space, isn't a space where we just talk about Resonum stuff. We like barely talk about Resonum stuff. Like we want to know what you're doing, what's going on in your life. Especially I think that's partly a nature of being so small. And I'm really interested to hear how other panelists who run like really big communities handle that. But like I have the honor of being able to like know everyone individually, and like being able to support them on a personal level is really cool. So yeah, those are my three.
Are there values that you feel that like any and every community builder 100% has to have?
I think probably that commitment to like safety and inclusion, I would think, or else like I think if you don't have that as a core value, like you're probably not cut out to manage that personally.
Yeah, I'll also echo one of Brenna's three, which was passion. I think your community is smart and they'll know if you're promoting a thing that you don't really love. And so I think, at least me, I know ideally sometimes we have to promote things we don't love, but ideally I think if you're really passionate about what you're doing, and you, again, on the flip side, you would want to be a part of the community you're creating, then you're doing the right thing.
Conversely, are there any values or personality traits that you feel like someone who wants to build a community shouldn't have or should avoid?
Ooh.
We only have an hour for the panel. I think a thing that you don't need and shouldn't have is an ability not to take feedback or inability to take feedback, because a lot of times your community, and hopefully your community is one where you're not all in groupthink together in lockstep, because then you just create an echo chamber where no one can have a real discussion. But if something happens, if someone comes in and I'm not talking about I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm talking about like having an ideological difference that isn't like one where somebody's got to leave the community. This is, I don't agree with this, and here's why, where you can actually have those conversations. But some people just can't hear any kind of feedback without viewing it as a personal attack. And, and also realizing you're not the sole arbiter. A community is collaborative. It's not just you.
All right. So let's move on to B. B is for boundaries and expectations. So this answers the question of what kind of community do you want to build and what are its values, which do not have to be the same as yours. They can be, but they absolutely do not have to be. So I'm going to give you some more homework. What are values of a community that you manage? And then add to that, how does that inform the tone you set and the decisions that you make?
So I can kind of jump in. So because I work with Kickstarters a lot, I know that one of the big values that like my community of backers have is actually value. Like they're extremely concerned with the actual cost of things and like what they're paying, what they're getting in return. It's like a very transactional relationship. For me personally, like that's probably not one of like my actual values. Like I see something on Kickstarter and look at it for a second. I'm just like, yeah, I want it. And then I never think about it again. But for a lot of people, that's not the case. So I have to like really adapt my thinking and put myself in the mindset of like, okay, are we giving these people what they want? Are we showing the value correctly? Are we conveying to them like why it costs this much and like why that's a good deal for them? Like obviously that's a more like concrete example, but that's something that like I've had to kind of warp my thinking to get my head around, to put myself in their headspace and make sure that I'm approaching it from a way that they'll find is fruitful for them.
What about you, Latia?
The value of Adventurers League is to create an even playing field for people who play Dungeons and Dragons. We set restrictions on, how players build their characters, what sort of, magical items they can have and everything. And I think the value there, like I said, is to make sure that everybody has fun at the table, to make sure that everyone is, evenly leveled, or at least evenly matched in terms of like player power. I just lost where I was going with this, but the value that I have that we have there is to make sure that nobody is like overlooked or kind of overruled at the table. Like if everybody is at that even, if everybody is on an even pace, there's no room for power creep or, what's the word I'm looking for? Power gaming. That's the one. There's no room for power gaming. So everybody kind of has an opportunity to shine at the table. It's, again, not quite one of my values because, if I see a really cool magic item in a book, I'm like, well, why can't I have that? Well, it's too overpowered for Adventurers League. And I'm like, okay, I'll deal.
Can you think of something that you and the other community managers, like a situation where you had to make a decision among the three of you, like your coven of community managers?
We are the fates.
I love that. Where this value of sort of equality, even playing fields, came into play and helped you make a decision?
Yes, constantly. There are a lot of magic items. Like, for example, in Tales of the Yawning Portal, When you play White Plume Mountain, you've got those 3 sentient magic items that are kind of constantly the subject of ruling amongst the players. I think we're still kind of figuring out exactly what will be the results, like if you acquire one of those magic items, but we're constantly reevaluating, and I think that is a thing that people should always be doing. Like, things change. You may have to kind of take a step back and look at something that you gave a ruling previously and think, well, maybe does it need to be changed? Does it need to be re-ruled? That situation, I think, when it comes to some of the more what we would call in adventures like story items, the items that are only meant for one person to have, or a little bit overpowered for the table.
Great. Let's see, Rachel.
Sure. So yeah, I feel very lucky that my values align very well with Resonum. It's partly why I'm there, because I saw them and I was like, that is for me. And I think the core 3 for Resonum are probably social consciousness, and accessibility, and then again, inclusion in general. A lot of our earlier games in particular were actually researched at like a game lab that brings in psychology into gameplay. And our goal with a lot of our games is to help in subtle ways, like spark social change and spark new ideas and thinking about ideas in new ways, and particularly the type of people who can play games. Like we use all she, her pronouns in our rule books because most of them are he, him, and that's just been a really weird standard for a really long time. And so that just aligns really well with my values in general, and we're very transparent with that. And I think partly because we wear that on our sleeve, we attract people who like that. Like, not that people can't slip in through the cracks, but the people who are drawn to us are the people who value those things as well. So I'm very lucky that I feel like it aligns very well. What Brenna said about Kickstarter, though, is a whole thing. Because like I do feel like there is a bit of dissonance between the folks that we get on Kickstarter and the folks who I would consider in our like tangible community. And riding that line can be very hard because I have to manage both of those groups of people, and there is overlap, but there are people who like just want to buy our product and like that's it. And that's a much different experience. And those people, I would agree with a lot of what Brenna said, like the value and all of that, like nitty gritty stuff is much more something you have to handle with Kickstarter. And one of the challenges that I've had with that is like learning, I guess, like that's the one time I feel like I've had to change I've had to address a situation differently than I would in real life, where you have to pretend like everyone has a great idea on Kickstarter, when like you have to just act like, wow, I've never thought about that new way of 3D modeling these components, even though we've been 3D modeling components for like 10 years. Like having to like, I can be kind of like a snarky person. And so those like Kickstarter encounters are where I encounter the most, having to kind of put on a face for the people I'm interacting with, because Kickstarter is more of a direct monetary transaction. You have to be more careful. Whereas with my community, like my actual physical community, I can be more transparent and more authentic, which is why I enjoy that work more than Kickstarter work in general.
Are there any ways that you make those like you gave a lot of examples about how Resonum like exudes its values, and so maybe the way you communicate them is by just wearing the like heart on your sleeve, but are there any ways that you like explicitly kind of set expectations for what Resonum's values are?
Like it's hard because I mean I feel like we do explicitly set it through like our games and our products. I mean we get nasty comments like every day about people being like, you advertise yourselves as women-led, like why are you doing that? It's like, well then you can leave. Like that you can buy, you can just go away, that's fine. And I feel like people get it. I haven't had to set it explicitly as much, and I feel like we also just set the tone, like even with our Twitch channel, like we are like there's 5 of us, we're very small, and so just by going out and being ourselves, I think people get our vibe when you meet us and when you interact with us. So nothing like explicitly, and I also don't really know what that would look like. I'm just used to doing it through leading by example and leading through like the products that we put out. So yeah, sorry if that's not a great answer, but that's just been my experience.
There's no wrong answers. Tanya, what about you?
It's interesting because I've been reading the question and listening as everyone's talking. I don't think my community can't have the same values I do, or I can't build a community that does not have the same values I do. Like there are people like we may disagree on things. We may have some like we may disagree on pineapple on pizza, but if our values are that diametrically opposed, I don't think that they would fit in the community that's been built, because it's been built around like inclusion and diversity in games and Twitch streaming, and the person you see on Twitter is the person that you're going to get in person or on my stream. Like, I don't do the peppy, oh my god, I'm so glad to be here. Like, if that ever happens, you've gotten a pod version of me.
Now we
I
know.
would be concerned.
Check that I've got a belly button, because that will never be me. And so it's interesting because while people can have different values and different opinions, I don't think that the community that's been built out of what I do for the last 5-6 years, it can be opposed to my actual values. The only way that would work is if someone doesn't show themselves to be a terrible person. And then if they do, they got to go. We very much adopted the "we don't do that here" mentality. And I'm going to take this ambassador. So that is a charity, sorry, not a foundation, about mental health and gaming. And so that is very important to us. It's very important that people can express themselves if they're having issues. And we do have some of our Take This friends, at least in my Discord and channel. So for me, it's all about having a safe, inclusive space. And that is the core of my value. So if someone doesn't believe in that, they can't be there. And for me, boundaries are like, in certain things, like in my Twitch channel, if you're new to the channel, let's say if I raid Latia or Latia raids me, and I see Latia a lot virtually, and like we've gotten to hang out, we know each other. So if Latia comes in and says, "Hey, Tanya, blah, blah, blah," but random stream person who came in on the raid starts calling me Tanya, that's a boundary. It's like, I don't know you. Who are you? And not in the "who are you" peasant, but in a "I don't know you. For right now, you're just a screen name. So for now, you can call me Cypher Tier, and that's it." So my values are built into the community that's been built. And so boundaries have saved me, and I think in some ways very literally, because while I'm not a different person online than I am in real life or in person, there's still a boundary of, I don't know you that well. Let's get to know each other first before you get a little too close,
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit more about boundaries. Oh, wait, no, Brenna, go ahead.
Can I just respond to that really quickly?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that, like, I particularly appreciate the work that you've done in that space, Tanya, because I feel like you were one of the first content creators who I saw kind of like publicly set boundaries with like parasocial relationships, and seeing you being like, "Hey, like, I don't know you, it's not okay to joke with me like that," or something, or like, "That's overly familiar." Because I used to have like big issues with setting those boundaries with people. It was like very like inspiring to like see somebody be very like firm with like how people interact with them, and kind of like gave me a template for how to do it.
Yeah, I actually just dealt with that in a stream where someone came and was like, "Oh, hey, sweetheart," and I was like, no, we don't know each other that way. You can call me Cypher, maybe you can call me Tanya, but no, like, the person that gets to call me that is not in this stream right now. So.
We all had a very visceral reaction to that. No, thank you.
Like, I was like, and Latia knows, I mean, you all know this, I cannot hide my face. I'm the worst at neutral expression. And I literally was just like.
Before we move on, actually, Brenna, you used a term that some folks watching this panel right now might not know: parasocial relationships. Can you explain a little bit what that is?
Yeah, so it's basically like a relationship that exists in, like, usually in a digital space, where you may have some kind of like very superficial relationship with somebody, like you're a Twitter follower of theirs, that's the relationship. But the person has like extrapolated that in their mind to be like, "Oh, we're friends, like I know them, like I'm involved in whatever they're doing." That's my interpretation of it, and it's usually from the perspective of like a fan or a follower of like a bigger presence or creator.
Mm-hmm. Which brings us to boundaries and setting those. So how important are boundaries? Why are they important? How do you set a boundary?
I will start by saying boundaries are incredibly important. Depending on the community, some boundaries can be difficult to set, but they should always exist. Whether it be, whether it be the boundary of I'm only going to answer questions from 10 a.m. in the morning to 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and then I'm going to take a break, or the boundary of in Adventures League, boundaries are interesting. I think the way that we set boundaries are by insisting that people have codes of conduct for their events, because that is a wonderful boundary. It sets the expectations of your event. It lets people know what you're about. It lets people know consequences for breaking those boundaries. And is when I became a community manager and realized that that was a thing. I mean, I knew it was a thing, but like realizing that we put these boundaries here for you to make sure that we know what you're doing and that you know that we expect this of you. So boundaries are incredibly important. And like I said, sometimes difficult to set. Like Adventures League can't set a boundary for every event that happens. So we have to trust that those events are going to set those boundaries themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Rachel had something to say.
Yeah.
Oh, you kind of hit a lot of what I was going to say. I kind of interpret the boundaries, the B for boundaries, to be boundaries for yourself. I find that mental health with community managers can kind of be ignored a lot. Like our job is never off. Like our community exists when we're sleeping, and it exists 24/7. And so one of the things for me, partly because I feel like our community is small and I've gotten lucky that we've only had a handful of like negative experiences that I've had to really like deal with. So boundaries for me are more setting boundaries for myself, because I am someone who just wants to get to know people. And if there's an issue, I want to like address it immediately, and I want to get to know everyone. And I also like can't stop working. And I magically found a job that never stops, which for me can be dangerous. And I learned that, especially in my first year of doing community management, that I was getting burned out really, really quickly. I was responding to DMs on weekends. Like after I went home from work, like I would still be engaging with people, which is like fine sometimes, but you really do have to know yourself and know like, when is this too much, and communicating that with your community of like, I don't answer DMs on weekends. Like that's sleep time. That's when I like rest, so that on Monday I can be like the person I need to be to interact with these issues and interact with these people. And so, yeah, just setting boundaries for yourself and knowing when is too much, and knowing like being in tune with yourself, and just being aware that this job can be really taxing. I feel like a lot of people think it's really easy. Like you just talk to people and like have a really social job. Like it is hard. It's really hard, and it's really taxing, and it's a lot of emotional labor.
Mm-hmm.
And being aware of that and knowing how much emotional labor you can do before it becomes too much. So for me, that's the big boundary I've had to work on, at least with my like community size.
I actually think there might be some folks watching who don't understand what the concept or haven't heard of the concept of emotional labor. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so emotional labor is sneaky and it'll get you. It's basically, at least the way that I understand it, it is like when two people are having an issue in your community, or just like people are wanting to talk to you a lot, you have to engage with that. And if you're someone who, especially if you're like me and you're introverted, you don't like necessarily like thrive off of talking to people all the time. It takes effort to like engage with people thoughtfully and consciously. And if there's issues, like evaluating both sides, like that is, it's not physical labor. It's not necessarily like mental labor. You're not crunching numbers, but you are putting in empathy into a situation, and putting in that much empathy all the time to a bunch of different people who you have different levels of familiarity with is hard, and it's really taxing. And so that's how I would describe emotional labor. It's sneaky. It'll get you. Like you won't know you're doing it when you're doing it all the time, which is why I think it can be dangerous and hard, and why people who don't do that as like the core of their job don't understand it, because it's a type of exhaustion that maybe they haven't experienced before. Like if you're tired talking to your coworkers, imagine your entire job is like just talking and managing people. That's the best way I can put it for someone who hasn't experienced it before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Brenna.
Yeah, I've done a lot of the same things. Usually like in the first update that I do on a Kickstarter campaign to all the backers, I lay out like what my schedule is, and I'll say like, this page will be monitored on these days of the week between these hours, and like that's it. I didn't used to do that, and it was like nightmarish because, you know, like Rachel said, I was like on my phone all the time, like all hours of the day and night, like waking up in a cold sweat, literally like having nightmares about not responding to people on time. Like It was really bad. So like I really had to set that boundary. Another one I've set is And this has been tricky because I mentioned transparency, and like I've kind of positioned like myself as being like part of my brand and did that intentionally. Like, and I'm very public and open about that. Like all of my social media accounts are like my full name. Like people can just find me and message me. They're all public. And they're not like curated for work content. It's like just total stream of consciousness. Like this is me. If you want the professional stuff, go to the business account. But I have had to institute, like, I'm not going to talk like business stuff, like in DMs. Like you can't DM me on my personal account. Like you need to DM the business account to do that. Like I'm not going to talk to you like through Instagram DMs or something like that. So that's a boundary that I've set, definitely. Also, like when it comes to emotional labor, one thing that I think that we have to do as community managers is like, it's almost an abstraction of the self a little bit, because when you're dealing with somebody who is like unhappy with the decision that you or the company or the brand has made, like you kind of take that on, like you become the avatar of like everything that they're upset about. So it's really hard to kind of like remove yourself from that and understand like, okay, like they're not upset with me, like as a person, they're upset with this decision, and I need to like connect with them to explain like why this is happening and like why I think it's a good thing. And, you know, sometimes it doesn't always work, but yeah, trying to like remove yourself from feeling so like personally involved in it is a challenge, I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm just going to kind of second what Brenna said, especially if your brand isn't necessarily yourself. If you're representing another company and you don't necessarily have control over the decisions that are made. I used to take any criticism of Resonym as a like thing super personally. And like, I am not Resonym. I'm 1/5 of Resonym, and I might not even have been involved in that decision. And that's a huge, especially if you're working on a small company. That's a huge boundary to set, is like not every criticism lobbed at, and this also is echoing what Tanya said about not every criticism is a personal attack, and not every criticism is even about you or something you can control, and not taking that personally can cut back on the emotional input that you put into your work. So yeah, I'm just kind of echoing that.
For me, I try to establish very firm boundaries. Like I've had people try to add me on Facebook to do business, and I've got like 80 unanswered requests because I don't do business through Facebook. My profile is personal. I talk about like my life there, and not in a, oh, I'm super secret and do all these things. It's like, no, I need to have some space that is strictly personal. I have a contact form and other, like, or if I do anything and people circumvent, like, I know you've got a contact form, but I've got your email, so I'm going to email you. And I'm like, well, you failed the first test of following directions, because that means you're going to do this on a project or something else. And like when people DM me, like I had someone DM me in Discord of all places, because we share a Discord, and I'm like, I just read this like thesis length note. I'm like, there's literally a business email in my pinned tweet. This is how you contact me. And people are like, well, you know, why are you like this? Well, one, we haven't talked about it, but I've been stalked and harassed. And I, as a matter of personal safety, but also I need one space where messages go. Otherwise, I will never answer them. They will get lost. They'll be in the ether. And, you know, and also just in terms of like what is and isn't okay in like Twitch chat and the Discord, you know, when we do rivals and things like that, where it's like, there's a line, and if you cross it, you got to go. And I try to be very clear about that. That's why our code of conduct document, it states up front, it's a living document. And thing, you know, it can be changed. We're not like, this is it, this will never change, it's written in stone. But that boundary is, you elected to come here. Whether you are a patron, a Twitch subscriber, or whatever you do, you elected to come to this house. And as such, there are certain etiquette rules and things you should do when you are visiting someone's house. And that's the way that I treat it. Like, I'm letting you visit me virtually. And, you know, Latia among you has actually been in my apartment. But Latia also was awesome and came and visited and hung out. But we've also known each other. So, you know, having had good home training, as we'd like to say, you wouldn't come in someone's house and act the way that we see people act online and talk to community managers and talk to people who work on games. So I think there's just like the expectation of etiquette as a boundary, which may sound weird to some people, but, you know, for those of us that have home training, as my grandmother would like to say, you act a certain way when you visit people, and you're visiting when you are in a community.
Yeah. I kind of want to summarize a bit of what everyone has talked about, which is really two ways of setting boundaries and expectations. One is sort of, and this is more for setting boundaries for yourself, sort of training people how they are able to treat you and what access they have to you. If someone is DMing your personal account, but you have a separate brand account or a company account for a company you're representing, it is okay to tell them, hey, I don't answer DMs about work. Please email me. Here's my email address, or DM this account. The other one that both Tanya and Latia mentioned was setting a code of conduct. A good code of conduct is going to set the expectations for what behavior is okay or not okay. Let you know what the consequences are. If you break this code of conduct, you might get kicked from a Discord community, or you might lose access in Adventurers League to having special Adventurers League events or something like that. And also maybe contact information for if someone sees that a code of conduct is being broken, how they can report that behavior. All of those things, super important, and a really good way to set expectations and boundaries explicitly and empower you to enforce those boundaries and expectations. All right. So the last letter of the ABCs is C, which stands for communication and engagement. And these two are really, really important because they're not just about you're building the community, but they're sort of the next step of how you're activating the community and harnessing it so that the people in your community want to be your biggest brand ambassadors. So I'm wondering what communication means for the different panelists. So fill in the blank of like communication should be blank.
I'll go first.
Yeah,
if
Rachel.
No one else wants to. My gut reaction is just authentic. Like the number of times I've been in meetings where, the people on our team are trying to figure out, like, we got this email or we got this question, and like, how are we supposed to answer this? I'm like, just tell them what happened. Tell them how we feel, what happened. Like, at least in my experience, like just being honest, not trying to curate like the way you're supposed to like handle like just tell them what happened. Tell them, like, especially because I do feel like our group is a very just like authentic group. Like, just do that. Like, don't try to put on like a business face. Just be real with the people you're talking to, because that's just, I always find that to just be the most natural and the best way to solve most, at least issues that I've encountered, is like, just be authentic, just be honest, tell them what happened. And especially, even if it's not a negative situation, if it's a positive, like, just be yourself. Like, I know that sounds so stupid, but like communication there shouldn't be a filter, at least in my experience. I just like to talk to people like I'm talking to people and just be authentic about it. Mm-hmm. And whatever authenticity means to you, that's different for everyone. But
yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't know, like, if I can sum it up in one word. Maybe it's like the word I'm looking for is like sensitive. What I'm trying to convey is like actually answering like what's being asked of you. And sometimes, like, in community management, we do have to kind of do like around the block speak, kind of like dance around an issue, especially if it's like, for another company or brand where it's like either information we don't have, it's maybe not public information. There's like a million reasons why we have to do that. But like when possible, I think like really trying to get to the root of like what somebody's saying and what they're trying to convey, and finding a way to address that is really important, because sometimes they do come out and say, and they're very blunt, and then other times like it may manifest in different ways. So like kind of being sensitive to what people are saying, and trying to like read the truth in what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. For me, it'd be ongoing, because you can't just say a thing and then consider it done. You need to, talk to people, and whether, and communication doesn't always have to be bad. I feel like a lot of people, when they hear you need to communicate, they assume it's a bad thing, like the infamous, do you have time to talk? We need to talk. And that sends everyone's anxiety through the roof, because people do that and then there's no follow-up, and you're like, about what? So I think communication just needs to be ongoing, and whether it's kind of checking in, whether it's a good or a bad thing you need to talk about, because we're not mind readers. If I was a mind reader, I'd be a lot richer. So I think that for me, that's key. And like, I try to talk to people as often as I can, or I'm just as transparent as I can be, and that's with the community, people I'm working with, and Latia can confirm or deny that. But for me, it's the key thing is ongoing. You can't just like have a one and done thing and expect it to be okay.
Mm-hmm. Latia, anything to add?
No, it's actually Brenna who kind of got what I was going to say. Open wasn't the word. Open is not the right word that I should use, that I wanted to use, but Tanya kind of got it with ongoing. Like it should be um honest. You should say what you can say, and it's not always I can't. It's not the answer is not always I can't talk about this. It's like, I don't have that information.
Yeah.
When I have that information, I'll let you know. So ongoing, like Tanya said, and honest, like Rachel said, it's pretty much everything I wanted to say.
Yeah, and one thing to think about, and this is a caveat, honest does not mean you have to be cruel.
Yeah.
Because so many people, they'll be cruel and go, but I'm just being honest. And I'm like, there's a difference.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to combo the next two questions. Tell me, what are the different ways in which you engage with your communities? What platforms do you use? And I guess, what are those platforms good for? If they're good for a particular type of communication, how does your communication vary by platform? I comboed like 5 questions there, actually.
Good job.
I'll start.
Okay.
So Adventurers League uses both Facebook and Twitter, although our Twitter is mostly for announcements of things happening. We also have a blog, but again, the Twitter and the blog kind of go hand in hand. If something goes on the blog, we make an announcement about it on Twitter, and then we make an announcement about it on Facebook. But the Facebook groups, we have 2. We have one for general Adventurers League questions, and we have one for Dungeon Master questions. So we engage with both of those. The community managers are really just mediators for some of the questions. It's mainly meant to be discussion amongst the community, and then we step in as needed. But I think, what was the question again?
There were 5 of them, so it's understandable.
There were a lot.
But I guess I'm trying to get an understanding of like what platforms you use and how does communication vary by platform?
Okay, so Facebook is mostly letting the community communicate amongst themselves and having the admin step in as necessary, whether it be to issue a final ruling or to tell someone that they're not being a good community member and to knock it off, or to sometimes, unfortunately, we have to escort people out of the community. Twitter and our blog are mostly just for announcements. Occasionally we'll get a DM about events going on Twitter, but Twitter is mainly just announcements and kind of keeping up with the community, because a lot of the community is on Twitter these days.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go.
All right.
In terms of platforms that we're using, I'm not on TikTok. I'm holding out. I'm actively managing communities on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, Slack, Twitch, Kickstarter, and then Board Game Geek, which is it's a board gaming specific hub that's doesn't really have like wider world significance, but is important in the board gaming world. I think the tone definitely changes from platform to platform. Twitter is the platform that I tend to be most comfortable on, so I feel like Twitter is like my most like natural and free flowing kind of conversation. Facebook tends to be like more corporate, maybe a little bit more formal, and then Board Game Geek is more like if I'm on there, it's pretty much to deal with like rules and gameplay stuff, so that's more like procedural sort of. So Twitter is probably like my favorite platform, and then like Instagram, because I can like kind of experiment with communicating more visually, so I enjoy that.
Rachel?
Sure. Yeah. So when I started at Resonum, we had Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I think that was pretty much it. And those communities already kind of existed, but they weren't tangible and we weren't really doing anything with them. So the first thing I did when I came in, I was like, we need to make a Twitch channel, because I love Twitch. I've been watching Twitch forever. And I've found that the times when Resonum really shines is at conventions, like when people can come up and meet us and we can talk and we can just be like, we love what we're doing. We want to get you to love it too. And I was like, the only way that I can like transfer that through the internet is like to sit in front of a camera and say, hi, I love what I'm doing. You should love this too. And the only way I knew how to do that was on Twitch. I was like, that's what my favorite part of my job is running the booths at conventions, because I get to just like look someone in the face and be like, this is why I love it. And that's kind of just what I have done on Twitch, and it's what I really love about Twitch, is that I get to just go on there and I get to be myself. You get to see inside our very weird, goofy team, and there's no like feeling for a need of like a corporate filter, or like with Instagram, everything's kind of curated, and at least with like business Twitter, every tweet needs to, at least I feel like, has to be, you know, important and intentional. Like if you go to our Twitter, what are the first 5 tweets you see? Like, do they say something important about our company? Whereas with Twitch, it's kind of more just like, it's just normal chatting with people, which is what I just love so much. And that's why I love Twitch. And same with Discord. I've also created a Discord server where people just hang out. My moderators just spend like half of our Discord server just like roasting me, which is just really fun. And I just find that a good way to build, like, I don't know, the types of relationships that I love. That's also where we handle more like interpersonal issues, is in our Discord. Because that's really where our community exists, at least how I understand it. And then we also have the Board Game Geek and Kickstarter communities, which are very different. And I think the communities where Kickstarter is great because those are the people who are really engaged and want to help us build our product. And we've made tons of like major decisions mid production of a game based on what people have told us on Kickstarter, which is awesome. That's like the only real place where that happens, which I really value. Board Game Geek is an interesting place. Board Game Geek, I have a love and hate relationship with Board Game Geek. It definitely hits in a lot of ways the side of the board game community that I don't always love. So navigating that can be challenging, and that is much more, as Brenna said, like gameplay issues. So sometimes you get really awesome people try to mod our games to be different, like fit certain needs, like single player mods. You find those on Board Game Geek, which are awesome. So you can't, as a board game company, we kind of made the mistake because none of us really use or like Board Game Geek, because it's just kind of a weird, I don't know, it's kind of a weird space. We made the mistake, I think, initially by kind of ignoring Board Game Geek, and you really do have to engage with it as a board game company because it is such a monolithic thing in the board game community. And so learning how to handle it and handle it correctly has been challenging. But yeah, sorry, that was long-winded, but those are all the platforms and the differences between how we engage with them. Twitch is my favorite, though. I love Twitch.
For me personally, I've got Twitch, Twitter, Discord, Instagram. I'm the worst at Instagram though, because since I haven't been traveling, no one has. I'm like, what am I going to take photos of? There's only so many times I can take a photo of the same cat in the same spot on the floor. But I have the biggest, I hate the word following, but the biggest presence on Twitter. But my Twitter's like, you're going to get my random 4 a.m. thoughts as well as a well thought out thread on whatever's on my brain or something I saw that annoyed me. I've been streaming on Twitch almost 6 years now. I know, and it's good engagement, and it's a way to keep the community going, especially in the time that we're doing this, because there's nowhere to go, and for a lot of people, that is their only interaction with other folks. And on the I Need Diverse Games side, we have all the same things. We've got a Facebook page, and right now we're not really active because, again, nowhere to go. But our Twitter and our Discord are the most interactive right now. And in both cases, Discord's a place to have conversations, to get to know people, to learn more about each other in a way that you can't on Twitter and in Twitch chats. Because even in Discord, tone does not convey over text. And so if someone says a weird thing or you read it in a certain way, you can then go ask, well, how did you mean that? You can't really do that on Twitter. And I am the fastest block in the West on Twitter, because I just don't have time for it. And that is me, that is on the I Need Diverse Games side, because there's been too many bad faith actors to assume good intent some days. Other days I'm a little more forgiving, but 6 out of 7 probably not. And that could be a bad community building thing, but when people have shown you who they are, you have to accept what they show you and run with that versus giving people too many chances. Which is kind of a downer note, but unfortunately that's how my experience has kind of colored how I interact with people. So, Twitter is very off the cuff. This is what it is. And I Need Diverse Games is a little more businessy, but you know, you follow me on Twitter, you never know what you're going to get, and Discord is more conversational, more long form talk.
I guess, again, to summarize what all four of you have touched on, there are many different platforms where you can be community building, and there's different communication styles that work better for those different platforms. And also, the different platforms can attract different types of members of your community and what they might want from you or the brand you're representing. I'm wondering, because we mentioned so many different platforms, does anybody have tips for managing communication on the different platforms, keeping that organized? Is there any like software actually that you use? Or we touched a little on mental health tips already.
Oh, go ahead, Bren.
No, it's just in terms of software. This has become like more vital to me since I've been in Australia. I use like scheduling software to schedule like posts and notes to everybody to go out through the day, because I'm like not usually awake when most other people are. Yeah, I think it's just about like adapting. I think like you just have to like really like live in the social space to kind of learn like the vernacular of it, and that only comes with experience. So like unfortunately that does mean like I say I'm like aggressively online, like because I just feel like I'm always online. And so I think it's hard for people who maybe aren't inclined to do that to learn like the very intricate differences between like the vernacular of each platform. So that's just something that comes with like time and experience and kind of immersing yourself in it. I think there's like very stark tonal differences between each platform that are probably like subtle to people who don't live in it every day.
Latia.
I don't use any like outside software other than my calendar because necessary. But I would say for anyone who is looking to engage on a specific platform, find out what all that platform is capable of. More recently, aggressively online as well, and Twitter being my primary platform, I figuring out what the accessibility tools are on Twitter. Like I've started, I don't always get it right every time, but I've begun doing alt text for my pictures, because I do know that there are a lot of visually don't know what I don't know what the proper term is, but like blind and like visually impaired community members, and giving them that alt text so that they can understand what is in the picture that they may not be able to see so well, is very helpful. So I would say no matter what platform you use, like take some time to just kind of poke at it and see what is available for you to use. Because you may find a feature that you didn't know that you had, or a feature that may be very beneficial to your community at large.
I use if this then that. I think that's what IFTTT stands for.
Yes.
I can never get all the T's right. It's really beneficial. So like if I do like a blog post or something, it can go everywhere, and I don't have to worry about like different tweets and Instagram, and it all looks different. It's like here's one push. I mean, I also try to limit my time online. Like first thing in the morning, kind of as I'm having coffee, whatever, on a break, and then in the evening, so I don't have something to do. Because being online all the time, at least for me, has not been great mental health wise, especially with the state of the world. So one thing I would say is know yourself well enough to know if you'll get drawn into the rabbit hole of Twitter and Instagram, and if it helps schedule yourself time to do these things, and like Brenna does, schedule posts. That way you don't have to worry about like, oh shoot, I forgot the announcement. Just schedule it, find things that work for you, and go from there.
Rachel, any last things to add?
I think everyone really hit it. I really loved what was said about spending time on the platforms that you're going to be using. Like, don't go on Twitch if you have never watched Twitch. Like, especially Twitch and Discord are two of the ones that I think are the most dissimilar from normal social media. Especially like, as Tanya said, like people will be over familiar in Twitch chat, which is something that like in Instagram, it might not bother you as much. You can delete the comment, you can like whatever, but like your face is there. And if someone's being weird, you have to be like prepared to handle that, and be like, know what effective means to handle that are. Like watch other people, see how other people do it, know the language. And also, as Latia said, like what it's capable of, like captioning on Twitch is important. All that stuff so that you can do it right from the start is important. And the same kind of over familiarity happens in Discord too, and join Discords and understand how people handle that and what that looks like. So you're prepared for it, to also hit the mental health thing so that when those things come up, you know how to handle it. So yeah, spend time in the spaces that you want to curate is really important.
Well, thank you all for sharing your wisdoms on the ABCs of community building. Authenticity, boundaries, and communication. You master those 3 steps, you're off to a really, really good start as a community builder. Let's go through the panel and do some outros, starting with Brenna.
Hey, thanks so much for having me again. I'm Brenna Noonan. You can find me on Twitter at Brenna Noonan, pretty much everywhere as Brenna Noonan. I'm the co-founder of Quillsilver Studio. We create tabletop game products. You can find us at Quillsilver Studio on Facebook and Instagram, or on Twitter at by Quillsilver.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm Rachel again, Rachel Billings, or Ray. You can find me at Twitter at @_Raybird_, because Raybird was taken, which is like my usual handle on all socials. And you can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Resonim, and pretty much all of our socials are just at Resonim, so find us there. And thanks again for having me. I just want to say I'm really honored to just be on this panel with all you folks. Really, really big moment for me, so thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. I have been Latia Jacquise. You can find me across most social media as Latia Jacquise, LATIA JACQUISE. I'm also behind the D&D Adventures League Twitch, which is at DND_ADV League, LEAGUE. I'm also on Twitch as well, but not so much these days. But you can find me kind of anywhere, again, aggressively online. It's a problem. And Lisa, thank you for having me on the panel as well.
I'm Tanya DePass. You can find me everywhere as Cypher Oftyr, CYPHEROFTYR. That is on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram. I still have a Tumblr, even though it's literally feels like it has tumbleweeds these days. You can also find me and Latia on Rivals Waterdeep, which is Rivals Waterdeep on Twitter, because the OF was a bridge too far for character limits. And yeah, I do a little bit of everything online. So say hi, be nice. And in the weird case that you find yourself blocked, it's because I ran a block list. It's nothing personal. Just say hi and we'll fix it. And again, this was awesome. I miss doing panels and talking to people. So maybe this time next year we can all be in person again.
Yes, please.
I think this is my first panel.
Wait, really? No way.
No.
I think so.
What? Well, you did great. Everyone in chat, clap for Latia. I am Lisa Penrose. I was your moderator today. You can find me on all the social medias, mostly, all of them, but also mostly Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch. Lisa Penrose, Lisa spelled with a Y. I am also the brand manager for a publishing platform called Dungeon Masters Guild, dmsguild.com. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and we have some Facebook groups. Our handle is DMS_guild. Check that out if you want to publish some D&D things. Hit me up and we can chat more about that. But thank you again, everybody, for joining this panel. And to everybody watching, thanks for joining as well, and enjoy the rest of your PAX Online. Bye, everybody.
Bye.